October 9th, 2025, 7:20 p.m. Moscow time. A Russian MiG-31 interceptor is on final approach. The pilots have done this hundreds of times. Routine training flight, normal landing. Except this time, something's wrong. The landing gear system fails mid-flight, no warning. The jet loses control. Both pilots punch out, ejecting into the evening sky as their aircraft slams into a wooded area in the Chaplinsky district. They survive. The jet doesn't. The Russian Ministry of Defense issues a brief statement. Landing gear failure, training flight, nobody hurt. Case closed, but here's what they don't tell you. And here's why this single crash matters more than you might think. That MiG-31 wasn't just any aircraft. And to understand why its loss is significant, we need to go back to the Cold War, the 1970s, the height of superpower tensions. Soviet engineers have a problem. American B-52 bombers and cruise missiles can strike deep into Soviet territory. They need something that can intercept these threats at extreme range, at extreme altitude, at extreme speed. So they designed the MiG-31. Based on the MiG-25, this is a two-seat supersonic interceptor built to do one thing better than anything else on Earth: hunt down and destroy aerial threats before they reach Soviet airspace. Top speed? 3,000 kilometers per hour. Ceiling? 21,000 meters, armed with long-range R-33 and R-37 air-to-air missiles that can hit targets most fighters can't even see. During the Cold War, NATO pilots feared this aircraft. They called it the Foxhound. The Soviets called it their shield. But then, 1991. The Soviet Union collapses. The Cold War ends. And in 1993, the MiG-31 production line shuts down forever. Approximately 500 aircraft total. That's it. No more would ever be built. At the time, that seemed fine. Russia had hundreds in storage. Surely that would be enough. Fast forward to 2025, here's the problem. Of those 500 aircraft, fewer than 150 remain operational today. And here's where it gets worse. Remember those engines, the D-30 F6S? They require a complete overhaul every 300 flight hours. Let me put that in perspective. Modern turbofan engines can operate for thousands of hours between major maintenance. Thousands. The MiG-31's engines need to be torn down and rebuilt every 300. That means if you're flying these jets regularly for training and operations, you're doing major engine work multiple times per year. And spare parts? Scarce. Qualified technicians who understand these specific engines? Increasingly rare. The maintenance burden is crushing, but Russia keeps flying them. Why? Because there's no replacement. None. The Su-57 stealth fighter was supposed to solve this problem, but production remains minimal and the program keeps facing delays. So Russia is stuck flying aircraft designed in the 1970s, built in the 1980s and early 90s to defend airspace in 2025. Now here's where the story takes a darker turn. In recent years, Russia found a new use for these aging interceptors. They modified some to carry the Kh-47 M2 Kinzhal hypersonic missile. This variant, the MiG-31K, suddenly became strategically critical. In 2022, Russia had only 12 of these aircraft. By 2024, maybe 24. These are now strike platforms capable of delivering hypersonic weapons. But here's the catch. Every single one is a refurbishment of a Soviet-era airframe. Russia isn't building new MiG-31s. They can't. The factories are gone. The supply chains are gone. The production infrastructure doesn't exist anymore, which brings us back to that crash on October 9th. Because it wasn't alone. Earlier in 2025, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces hit Russia's Savaslayka Air Base in an overnight strike. They damaged at least one MiG-31 and other fighters. On July 1st, another Russian fighter bomber and Su-34 went down near Nizhny Novgorod during a training mission. Both pilots ejected. The aircraft was destroyed. See the pattern? Combat losses, training accidents, mechanical failures. Each one removes an asset that cannot be replaced. Ukrainian outlet Defense Express put it bluntly earlier this year, losing even a single MiG-31K could have serious consequences for Russia's strike capabilities. There's no factory waiting to build a replacement. The only option is to pull another jet from the dwindling stockpile of mothballed aircraft and try to refurbish it, assuming one is still available, assuming it hasn't already been stripped for parts to keep other jets flying. And that stockpile? It's almost gone. In 2018, Russia had an estimated 130 to 150 mothballed MiG-31 airframes in storage. By early 2024, approximately 90 MiG-31B/BM interceptors remained in active service, plus 30 more with naval aviation. The mothballed reserve has been cannibalized. Russian officials are now openly discussing restarting production. Think about what that admission means. They're running out of aircraft, but wait, it gets worse. 3 days before that MiG-31 crashed in Lipetsk, Ukrainian drones struck the Feodosia oil terminal in occupied Crimea. This isn't just any facility. It's the largest on the peninsula, capable of storing 250,000 tons of fuel. The strike caused massive fires. Smoke plumes stretched 12 kilometers, visible from space on satellite imagery. Fuel shortages immediately worsened across Crimea and Sevastopol. Around 50% of gas stations stopped selling fuel entirely. Ukrainian forces also hit an ammunition depot belonging to Russia's 18th Combined Arms Army. Fuel storage, ammunition depots, transportation hubs all hit within days. These aren't random targets, they're coordinated strikes designed to strangle the logistics network that keeps an air force flying. Now imagine you're a Russian maintenance crew trying to keep Cold War-era jets operational. You already don't have enough spare parts, you already don't have enough qualified technicians, and now fuel supplies are disrupted, ground vehicles can't move equipment, the entire support infrastructure is under strain. And your aircraft? They're old, they're worn out. They're being flown harder than they were ever designed for. Something has to give. That landing gear that failed on October 9th. Landing gear systems aren't exotic technology. They're complex, yes, but well understood. They're maintained regularly because they're critical to every single flight. A catastrophic failure during landing means one of three things. Maintenance was deferred or done incorrectly. Parts were defective or worn beyond limits. Or the system simply wore out and nobody caught it during inspection. None of those possibilities are good. All of them point to the same conclusion. The fleet is breaking down. Russia's Air Force faces a dilemma that goes far beyond the MiG-31. Most of their capable aircraft are Soviet designs. The Su-27 family? Production began in the 1980s. Even the Su-34, which entered service in 2014, is built on an airframe derived from an older design. The entire fleet is aging, and the current conflict is accelerating the consumption of both aircraft and spare parts. Sortie rates are high, combat losses add up, routine maintenance gets deferred because aircraft are needed for missions right now. It's a death spiral. Every crash, every combat loss, every jet damaged beyond repair removes an asset that can't easily be replaced. Here's where the MiG-31 story becomes even more critical. Originally designed as a pure interceptor, it's been transformed into a strike platform for the Kinzhal hypersonic missile. This gave old airframes new strategic value, but it also created a unique vulnerability. There is no other aircraft in the Russian inventory configured to carry the Kinzhal, not one. Losing a MiG-31K doesn't just mean losing an interceptor, it means losing one of maybe 24 platforms capable of delivering a specific weapon system. And the variant that crashed in Lipetsk, even though it wasn't a Kinzhal carrier, it still represents a loss Russia cannot afford. The fleet is finite, it's shrinking, and every loss brings it closer to the breaking point. Russian officials talking about restarting MiG-31 production is an admission wrapped in a problem wrapped in an impossibility. When production ended in 1993, the Soviet Union still existed. The factories, the supply chains, the specialized workforce were all part of a military-industrial complex that doesn't exist anymore. Not in the same form. Restarting production of a 1970s design more than 3 decades later, the tooling has likely been scrapped. Suppliers who made specific components may not exist. Engineers who understood every detail of the design have retired or died. Even if Russia could overcome all these obstacles, and that's a massive if, it would take years to deliver aircraft. And those aircraft would be based on technology that's now half a century old. Think about what that means strategically. The MiG-31 was designed to intercept B-52 bombers during a hypothetical World War III. In 2025, it's being used to launch hypersonic missiles in a conflict that looks nothing like the scenarios it was built for. The mission has changed, the threats have changed, the technology has advanced, but the airframe is the same. From the 1970s, Let's bring this back to that evening in Lipetsk. Both pilots ejected successfully. They survived with injuries. That's the good news, but the aircraft is gone, scattered across a forest floor. One more MiG-31 that won't be flying again, one less in a fleet that's already too small. For Russia's Air Force, the margins are narrowing from every direction at once. The mothballed stockpile that had 130 to 150 airframes in 2018 has been depleted. The active fleet of roughly 90 interceptors and 30 naval variants is aging with every flight hour. Combat operations claim aircraft. Training accidents claim aircraft. Ukrainian strikes reach deep into Russian territory, damaging jets on the ground at their home bases. Fuel infrastructure is being targeted, creating bottlenecks that affect mission planning and maintenance. And the industrial capacity to build replacements at scale simply doesn't exist for these platforms. The Soviet Union built hundreds of MiG-31s because it had the industrial base, the resources, and the strategic imperative. Production ran from the early 1980s until 1993. 500 aircraft total. Modern Russia doesn't have those advantages. The infrastructure has contracted. Supply chains have fragmented. Economic resources are stretched across competing military priorities. Even the strategic calculus has completely changed. Those interceptors built to stop American bombers are now being used as missile carriers in a very different kind of conflict. The crash in Lipetsk was officially described as a routine training flight that ended in a landing gear failure. Both pilots walked away with injuries. The Ministry of Defense issued its brief statement. The aircraft fell in an uninhabited area. No civilian casualties. On paper, it's a closed case, just another accident in military aviation. But if you're watching Russia's military capabilities, if you're paying attention to the details, this crash is a symptom of something much larger. It's an indicator of a fleet under unsustainable pressure. Flying aircraft that cannot be replaced, facing challenges that extend far beyond a single mechanical failure. The MiG-31 was built to defend Soviet airspace during the Cold War. In 2025, it's still flying because there's no alternative. The modernized variants, the MiG-31K and MiG-31I with their enhanced capabilities, have extended the service life by giving these jets new missions, but they can't change the fundamental reality. The airframe dates back to the 1970s. The production line has been closed for over 3 decades. The reserve stockpile is nearly exhausted, and every time one crashes, the question becomes more urgent. How much longer can this continue? That landing gear that failed over Lipetsk on October 9th wasn't just a mechanical system. It was another small piece of an answer Russia may not want to hear. The shield is breaking, and there's no one left who knows how to forge a new one.